Hey, welcome back to The First Layer. My name is Richard. I'm your host here every Wednesday and live stream Sunday afternoon when we do our show, Ask for Help. I hope you're all doing well and welcome back to the show. This is part 2 of our Let's Build Robots, and that's exactly what we're doing. We are going to assemble Makey. Makey is a robot that is based on the OTTODIY, which we talked about last week. I'll have links to where you can find the OTTODIY open source project. This is a completely open source. All the hardware is still available online. You can still get it. You can buy kits directly from OTTODIY. I want to make it clear that OTTODIY or OTTODIY is not a sponsor of this episode. I just wanted to build this guy because I want to learn more about robots, as I said last week. And this is the perfect gateway to wanting to learn more about building and programming and getting robots up to run. So I want to thank Camilo Parra Palacio. I hope I said that right. Camilo Parra Palacio. He is the inventor of the OTTODIY. We're going to be talking to him in a few weeks. He's going to be on the show, and we'll talk all about 3D printing, how we got started, what was the genesis of the OTTODIY program, and how you can get involved with that as well. So let's dive in because we've got a lot to cover today. We are going to put together this wonderful 3D printed robot, and we're going to get him dancing today. So stick around. All right, so this is all the parts that we're going to need for this build. Now, let's start off with our 3D printed parts. As we can see, we have Makey already 3D printed in filaments.ca. Econofill red and white PLAs. We're going to need a servo shield. We'll need an Arduino Nano. We'll need 7 MG90 servos. We'll need a selection of screws, some servo horns, all that kind of stuff comes with your MG90s. You're going to need a USB cable, a screwdriver, of course, some heat shrink tubing, a little bit of wiring, some 1K resistors, and a couple of LEDs, your choice in color. And that's all we're going to need. So let's move on to actually starting to put things together. We're going to start with actually wiring up the LEDs. All right, so here what I'm doing is I'm just clipping off the longer lead, which is the anode lead. And I'm applying a little bit of flux here so that solder flows a little bit easier and sticks to that lead a little bit better. And now I'm just going to solder in this 1K resistor so that my lights don't burn out on me. It's a really easy process to do this. Like it's helping hands could sometimes work, but getting it lined up can be a bit of a challenge sometimes. You want to make sure that you got them lined up. Grab your solder. Yeah, it can be a bit of a nightmare. So a little bit more because it doesn't look like I got any on there. So here we go. I really like this flux. It's really easy to put it where exactly you want it. Just getting this all set up straight is a bit of a nightmare sometimes. So here we go. Clean the tip of your solder. Grab your solder or your solder. It's pronounced solder, not solder. And now we're just going to, and there I've messed it all up. I got to pull out some more solder here, and there we go. Now I got to set it all back up again. This is the biggest pain in the butt. If you don't know how to solder, and I am not an expert at this any way, shape, or form. I'm just tinning the tip of my soldering iron here, and there it moved on me. What a pain in the butt. So I've got some solder on there, so now I'm just going to get it to where it's supposed to be and add just a touch more and hold it in place and remove the iron. Hopefully I don't burn myself. There we go. Looks like it's in place and we're good to go. So that's pretty much all there is to it. Then of course you're just going to solder on your wire leads. Now your positive is going to go to that line that we have the resistor on. Here I'm going to just add a 3-pin connector, and this is going to come in handy when we attach this to the board. And the reason I'm using a 3-pin connector and not a 2-pin or singles, this just gives me the ability to put this on the board in one spot and not futz around with other little connectors. And the reason I put them away from each other on opposite ends is because I want to send a signal. I don't necessarily want to send a positive. Now I've put the LEDs inside the head and just adding a little bit of hot glue here to hold them in. Here in the carcass of Makey, there's a specific way that our servos have to go in. And because we're using these nice small micro servos, they are, and these are the metal servos. So they're all metal geared. They're not going to wear out on you. So your robot could last you a fairly long time. You'll see there's a little notch, and that's going to correspond with the little tab that's on the bottom of the servo. So now we're just going to go ahead and take our screws and screw this in. And this is fairly easy screwing these in. It's just that I got these big giant fingers and it can be a little tough at times to get things in. So having a magnetic screwdriver does help. So you can kind of get it where you need it. And these are self-tapping screws. So they always come with your servos. So it's pretty easy to get them into place. They just take a little bit of force, especially into this 3D printed plastic. It's not like this has been pre-done. Now, here I'm just kind of fitting the board. This is the servo board, the expansion board for the Arduino Nano. Just attach the Nano, make sure all the pins line up. And you want to make sure that your USB connection is in the same direction as the power port there on the servo board. The servo expansion, because they line up with the holes in the back of this carcass. And there you go. See, they line up nice and perfect. And now all we're going to do is screw this into place, take a couple of screws. This is where you're going to want to have some additional screws to put this in place. This is the only extra thing you're going to need. So some M2 self-tapping screws really helps out. Now, putting the servos into the upper body where the arms are is a little bit difficult, and there's not a whole lot of room in there to get your screwdriver. So I ended up using a flexi shaft on my little screwdriver here from my kit. Now the servo horn just goes in on top for the head, and here we're putting in the servo horn for the leg. And again, we're just using those M2 self-tapping screws. You'll see they are a little bit long here, but the key is getting this nice and flat so that it sits in there really nicely. Give it a little bit of a tighten so it's nice and flat in there. And now we've got these protruding screws, and if we left them, nothing would fit. So I'm just going to take my flush cutters here, my heavy duty ones, and I'm just going to snip off the ends, because it really doesn't matter now, because we're never going to remove these screws, because we're going to have a servo in there which is going to block us. And at this point is a good idea to, once you've got this down to, pretty flush with the top of that plastic, you've still got way more threading than you possibly need. So that servo horn is going to stay in there really well. And now we're just going to make sure that we line up the holes here. So we just pop our leg on. Now there's no servos in the leg yet. We do have the hip servos in place, which we put in earlier. And now we're just going to secure that servo horn and that leg using a screw through the servo horn and into the servo itself. And again, lining this up. The older I get, the shakier I get, so sometimes it is a bit of a problem trying to get this put together. So there we go. Now we'll just line it back up. And what I did was I made sure prior to this that all of my servos were pretty much at 90 degrees. Now we're just going to go ahead and insert our last servo into the leg, and just showing you how. Again, lining up that little notch with the notch that we see on the leg, and then we're going to drive a screw, one of those servo screws, right through that hole and into the servo itself. And again, this can be a little bit tricky, so take your time. Don't let anything get in your way, but just take your time and make sure that your servo doesn't fall out like I did. I wasn't thinking, but here we go. I'll just get that back on there. Yeah, call me fumble fingers, because that's definitely what I am. And now we're gonna get that lined up and secured. And this should be the last screw that we put in prior to putting on the foot. You'll see I already have one foot on. These are not totally easy to do, but once you've got that servo in there, you've got it locked in with that screw, you're just going to drive that cable up through those two holes because they align. And again, it can be a little tricky, so you want to be careful here. I'm going to use a little screwdriver here to kind of align it a little bit better so I can kind of get it through that hole. Now, these holes are plenty big enough for those servo ends to fall through. You just have to get them lined up a little bit. But once you do, you're all set to go. Now we're ready to get the foot mounted. So with the foot, you're going to need another servo horn here. We're going to trim up the servo horn a little bit. And you're going to see that here right away if I stop bumping cameras. And there's our foot. Where's our horn? There we go. There's our horn. So I'm going to take the horn and I'm just going to nip off a little bit the last two holes on one end of this. And these cross-type servo horns are the ones that I use throughout. And then I'm going to take a little bit off the other side so that this sits into the foot really well. I'm going to test fit it here just so that we can see exactly where it's going to go, what gives me the best. And you can see I'm just spinning it around. There we go. That looks a lot better. Fits a lot better. And we could go ahead and secure this in now if we wanted to, but I prefer to put the servo horn onto our servo first. That way I can lock it in, and I know that that servo horn is never going to come loose from the servo. I've had this happen on other projects, and I just want to make sure I've got the orientation right. So I flipped it around, plug it in there. Let's drop a screw on there, and then our servo horn is secured. The next step is going to be, of course, aligning this foot to go on there properly, and this is where you're going to need a little bit of strength. If you're young and you're trying to do this, I would recommend that you have somebody with some strength help you out. And you can see I'm going to struggle here a little bit to line this up, trying to figure out what the best way is. And I'd already done one of these already, so I should know. But here we go, getting that servo horn in. It does look like it's going to break, but it really doesn't. There's a lot of strength there, so... and there's little flexibility in this PLA, but once you've got it pretty much where you want it, then that rounded end, and you can kind of just force it in there. There you go. And now we're just going to drop a screw in to secure that servo horn, just like we did the other side. And we're getting pretty close to the finish line here. We've got all of our servos in place. We've got our feet in place, and now it's pretty much going to be just connecting the last little bits of stuff, and then we're going to go ahead and attach all of the motors to the board, which is pretty easy to do. We're going to have a diagram that comes up on screen when we get to that portion. And here I am again, Mr. Fumble Fingers, trying to get that screw in, but now there we go. We got the screw in. And now we're working on the arms. Again, we're just going to put the servo horn in. Now, in this case, I didn't cut the servo horn prior to putting it in, but there I am using those M2 self-tapping screws. And you'll see I left the servo horn a little bit long, so I'm just going to come back with my flush cutters, and I'm just going to trim that off. Boom, there we go. All done, nice and clean. And there's really two ways that you can put these on, but you'll notice that there's a solid piece to the back of the arm. and you'll see it right there. There's that solid piece right by where I was pointing to put that servo screw in to hold the arm in place. And that's usually the back side. You want to keep that to the back. And that's a good place to set it down on your bed as well when you're getting ready to 3D print. And now we're just going to drop that screw in there. We'll do the other side as well and get this all cleaned up. I got to tell you, this project was really cool. Now, I'm going ahead and I am connecting all of these servos. And you can see here in the diagram, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 correspond to the places where you need to plug in. Your left and right leg are going to plug into 2 and 3, your left and right foot 4 and 5, your arms 6 and 7, and then your head on 8. We've also got some LEDs here. The LEDs I have plugged into 10 and 11 on mine, and then I plugged in my speaker to number 13. And you'll notice that on these LEDs and the speaker, I'm not using the voltage pin. I'm actually using the signal pin. So now we're just going to put them all together. We got to tuck up all those wires up inside, and we'll just get ready to clamshell them all together. And it should just click into place pretty easily. Then we're going to glue on his little belt, and we're just using super glue here. What I've done is I've split the emblem into a couple of pieces, so I can plug that right into the hole where I put a little bit of super glue now, and we'll just toss that in there. If I stop dropping things, here we go. Boom, right on top. Excellent, excellent. Now we'll just let that dry. Or set up, and then we're going to put the rest of the M on. And when we put the rest of the M on, we're only going to do the upper part of the shell. We're not going to put any glue in the bottom part of the shell, because if we did that, we'd never get them apart. So now we're just going to take some glue, and we're just going to use it in the top area, just a little bit. I know I probably put a little bit too much in here, but there we go. Little bit, and that is all there is to it. Your Maker Auto DIY robot is now completely assembled. Pretty easy to do. It only took me about an hour, maybe 2 hours to put them all together. The printing took about a day and plus. So here we are. We're taking a look at Blockly now, and in Blockly, this is the Auto Blockly, which you can get from the store or from their website. Now, Auto Blockly is real simple to use. I found just doing some pretty simple things here easy enough. So I did follow some tutorials. So we started with structure, and we went with a setup, as we can see here. Then we just went down to Auto, and we just grabbed some of the necessary things that we needed here. So we've got pins for the arms left and right. We also have we've designated what pins are what for our buzzer, and for that, then we're going to go home. Then we have our LEDs turn on, which are the eyes. Our hands go up, they go to home, and then they go down. So they kind of swing back and forth. Then we've got a little setup for him to rotate his head. And then we're turning off one light so he kind of blinks, giving it a little bit of a weight. And then we move on to, again, we want to turn his head back to where it was, because he's kind of dancing away here, and he turns his eyeball back on. Then again, hands up, hands down, we're doing a little swing. Then we got some moonwalk going on here. And then, of course, we're going to go into some crossing and some flapping. And this is just some stuff I just grabbed just to give them a little bit of life. We go ahead, and what we want to do is make sure that we are on Arduino Nano. So we're going to go up here to the top, and we're going to make sure that we're on Nano. When we plug in our Makey, we want to make sure that we are on the right COM port. We don't have Makey plugged in at the moment, because I've already gone ahead and done this. In my case, it was port number 3. So that's COM port number 3. So we did that. Then we checked our code. Then we uploaded our code. And now we've got a dancing robot. Let's go and have a look. Man, I love this guy. He has done so many cool things, and I've only really scratched the surface. I don't know a ton about using the Blockly program, but as I showed you in the video, Blockly is so easy to use, and you can actually see the actual Arduino code or the C++ code that goes into this guy. So if you're a little bit of a code freak, you can go in and actually see what's going on and maybe make up your own code along the way. I don't know. Anything's possible. So again, I want to thank Camilo Parra Palacio. I have to write his name down so I remember it. I want to thank him for inventing the auto DIY robot. I want to share with you guys. I hope that you got something out of today's episode. Maybe you'll go and build one yourself. You don't have to build this guy. You can build any one of the robots that he's got. Everything from the original Auto right through to the Ninja. You can build all these. All the parts are readily available online, or you can buy a kit directly from their website, which I'll have linked down below. So, with that said, thank you again for joining me. If you want to support the show, you can always become a member by joining our membership, or you can leave me, send me a coffee if you really like what we're doing. And I want to thank again all of you for joining me today. And please leave a comment down below. Tell me what you like. Tell me what you don't like. And we're going to be exploring more robots in the future. So until I see you next time, please remember that the first layer is always your foundation to a great print.